Representative Wilms of the 142nd, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My comments, my remarks on the bill as amended are going to take a different perspective. And my perspective is going to be focusing on the fact that a small percentage of our population are gambling addicts or have difficulties or problems with gambling. And I want to speak on their behalf and bring their voices to this conversation here. The first thing that I would like to say is that, and again, I'm going to refer only to state of Connecticut material, but certainly the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, you know, we can go onto their website and they have a tab there for problem gambling. And in there, it's a couple interesting facts. First of all, and they and also other literature point out that throughout the United States, roughly 2% of all adults are gambling addicts. And then another 3% are considered to have chronic or problem gambling. And my familiarity with this is that unfortunately a family member of ours has been a gambling addict for the last 35 years, and so we have had to spend a lot of time in the addiction and recovery community. So again, I really do believe that I'm speaking here on their behalf. Having said that, I think gambling should be legal. I think it should be regulated like we do with cigarettes or alcohol to capture the social costs that are involved with that. I do personally gamble from time to time, so you know my comments are really directed more on the social costs there. So one of the last interesting thing that the Department of Mental Health site points out, and again this is the state of Connecticut, this is their view, problem gambling is twice as high for those individuals who live within 50 miles of a casino. So the reality is that wherever we put a casino, that new supply will create some new demand, whether it comes in the form of additional gamblers or it comes in the form of people who don't have a problem with gambling who become problem gamblers, or people sadly who are problem gamblers and then become addicts. So that is something that our own state is saying, while we here at the same time are debating whether to put another casino in the state. Another thing that I want to point out is that for those who seek recovery from their addictions or from their problem gambling, one of the most effective ways is through Gamblers Anonymous. And Googling Gamblers Anonymous, I just want to read all the sites here in Connecticut where you can go to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. And it goes to show that it's not somebody else's town, it's not some other place, you know, far away. It's pretty close to where we live. So here, for example, in the next week, there will be meetings here in Connecticut for Gamblers Anonymous in Bloomfield, Guilford, North Groversdale. There'll be 2 in Norwich, Stamford, Thompson, Meriden, Milford, Pawcatuck, Bridgeport, Coventry, Darien, Quaker Hill, Waterbury, Bethel, 2 in Middletown, West Hartford, Seymour, and Waterford. I want to move on to talking about what are the social costs exactly? What are we talking about, and how do we maybe quantify that? And so I found an excellent piece of literature. Again, it was commissioned by the state of Connecticut, and it's entitled Gambling in Connecticut, Analyzing the Economic and Social Impacts. It was prepared by a group called the Spectrum Gaming Group. It was done in 2009, so it's a little bit dated, but the information and the statistics there are still relevant. And it was prepared for Governor Rell. And what that study did was it did a very comprehensive view of the impact on Connecticut from gambling. And I'll just focus on some of the specific social costs. Let's start with the gamblers themselves. Those who have problems with gambling or who are addicts also are much more likely to abuse alcohol and drugs. As a matter of fact, 73% of gambling addicts also have alcohol use disorder, and also 38% of them have drug use disorder. That results in them using medical services at a higher rate and higher utilization. Secondly, in terms of costs, or the impact that a gambler has on their spouse, on their family members. So for example, with relation to a spouse who's married to a gambling addict, 52% of them have experienced significant periods of depression. The children are more subject to domestic violence and abuse. The children do more poorly in school, and 25% of youth whose parents have a gambling problem attempt suicide. Again, I'm quoting from the report that was done for the state of Connecticut. Switching back to the gamblers themselves, 15% have lower ambition versus 0.2% of the population at large, and 12% have lost time from work versus 0.1% of the population at large. Problem gamblers are also more likely to visit emergency rooms in our hospitals, and as we know, that's a very costly means of medical care. And 25% seek mental health help versus 11% of the population at large. In terms of crime, 14% of gambling addicts have written bad checks to pay gambling debts, and another 27% have committed some sort of illegal act. The study concludes by trying to quantify all these various phenomena and situations, and they come to the conclusion that if you add them all up and crunch a bunch of numbers, it comes out to about $13,600 per pathological gambler in terms of social costs. And if you take 2% who are problem addicts, and you take the state of Connecticut population, you run the numbers, you crunch the numbers, that comes to about $500 to $600 million of social costs here for the state of Connecticut. So based on that, I felt it appropriate to propose an amendment. Mr. Speaker, the clerk has an amendment. It is LCO number 7963. Would you please ask the clerk to call it, and I'd be allowed to summarize.
Will the clerk please call LCO number 7963, which will be designated House Amendment Schedule B.
House Amendment Schedule B, LCO number 7963, offered by Representative Wilms.
The representative seeks leave of the chamber to summarize the amendment. Is there objection to summarization? Hearing none, Representative Wilms, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment is very brief. It basically says that the casino has to deposit 5% of their gross gaming revenue into the Chronic Gamblers Fund. And that 5% came from the fact that 5% of our population is either an addict or a problem chronic gambler. And so, Mr. Speaker, based on that, I ask that I move the adoption of the amendment.
Thank you very much, sir. Will you remark further on the amendment before us? If not, let me try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The nays have it. The amendment is rejected. Will you remark further on the bill as amended? Will you remark further? Representative Wilms.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Well, obviously, I'm disappointed in the failure of the amendment, but I understand the reasons, and I will be voting no on the underlying bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.